Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your victory garden grow? We're about to show you. There's no silver bells or cockle shells, but there is a lot of zucchini and tomatoes and peppers that are coming up. So we're going to give you a June update of our victory garden. For those of you guys that are new to the channel, with the pandemic happening, we decided to put in an emergency food garden here on our property where we are trying to develop this into a homestead. This is not the ideal spot that I would have put a garden because we are going to be building our house further up on the hill, and I want to put in some raised beds up there where the new house is going to be. But for an emergency food garden, this is what we put in. And we ended up using landscape cloth on the garden, which is a new technique to us because we don't own a tiller. We had a couple neighbors come in and initially plow this up for us, and then we went through and added this all ourselves to try and make this as low maintenance as possible. And whether or not this is going to work in our area, we have no idea, but this is all just a test for us, and so we're going to show you how it's doing for June. Okay, so the very first thing I want to show you is, remember those plants that I had that were extra and I just was like, I just throw this on the outside of the fence because they have some dirt? Well, look, they're coming up beautifully. I also threw some wildflowers in here as well. This is one of my cucumber plants that is coming up beautifully in this spot, and some of the flowers mixed in, and I have a couple zucchinis. They start to get smaller as you get further down the fence because there is a tree blocking some of this light, but you know, these again were extras, so throw them in and just sort of see what happens, and they're happening. You look on this one, we even got a little pickle coming up. Some little cucumbers. So in our first row we have our potatoes, and remember we planted purple potatoes up here and a thin-skinned white variety down at the end. Can't even think of the name of it right now. We're already starting to see some flowers, which means we're going to get some tubers. The biggest thing we end up seeing sometime probably in July, August, is we start getting a lot of little grubs that are eating the worms. So hopefully we can keep those off. I do put a lot of BT in here, and that maybe will kill them. I don't really know. It's all just a test. We're going to see how that works. And some of our lettuce has already bolted down at the end, so I planted another variety down here, and this is a salad mix right here, and they're doing really well. We had some daikons at the end that have already been harvested. Have some bunching onions, some carrots coming up. Come down here, let me show you. Look at these beauties, they're about ready to pick. These are kohlrabis, and these taste like a cross between an apple and a cabbage, and they make a really good coleslaw. You can eat them cooked or raw. Down here at the end we have Pattersons that are growing in the loose dirt as opposed to in the plastic, and then I have some garlic down at the very end, and that was kind of a late addition, not really getting too much sun back here. And this is where our lettuce already had bolted, our Swiss chard, and look at these guys here. I recommend this for anybody that's living in a warmer climate. These are lizard spinach, and these are doing wonderfully in the heat. And I planted a bunch more of those too. Right here is where we tested planting seeds direct into the landscape cloth. That's not what this landscape cloth is for. This is just sort of a test to see if it would work. And if you remember from the last video, if you watched that, I was saying some of the seeds were washing under the cloth. Some people gave some great suggestions of using toilet paper rolls. We haven't tried that yet, but the seeds that I did plant before that suggestion was made are starting to come up. We do have a couple of the beets, some of them not so much. I wanted to show you though that this is what it looks like with the landscape cloth and weeds growing up. So it does come up through the landscape cloth. We're going to pull this out. And so this is what has to be done, I'd say probably once a week or so, cleaning these up. But for the most part, the landscape cloth does take care of a lot of these weeds. It does really reduce the amount of work that has to be done in the garden. And we have a lot of stuff going on around here right now. So the least amount of work that I have to do as far as hoeing, the better. These are our candy onions, and they're doing really well. I did have something that was eating them in the beginning. Might have been a root maggot, I'm not really sure, but a lot of them, you can see a couple holes here where they disappeared. And a lot of my Pattersons towards the end actually got eaten as well. So it's Patterson from here down, and it's candy onions from here up. This looks like a jungle. These are my zucchinis, and I do have zucchinis actually coming up in the center here. I don't think there's going to be any issues whatsoever with zucchini. Down here at the end, these are our winter squash that we had planted, and these are actually starting to do really well. A lot of people ask, you know, what are you going to do with this winter squash, these pumpkins, as they start to spread out? Well, my beans should be done by then, and the onions will be clearing up, so this area will actually start to die off as these things take off even more. At least that's the plan. So as they continue to grow other things around them, I'm not going to be planting a lot around them, so they should have room to spread. These are lima beans. I have never grown lima beans before, so this is a new experiment for me altogether and seeing how they grow. So far they're growing pretty well. And then over here on my right hand side is my first row of Roma tomatoes. I have no idea how many plants I have, 40 some plants, quite a few, but I planted a whole bunch just to make sure that we had food if there were any shortages with the grocery stores, which it does not look like there is right now. Maybe there will be in the fall, maybe there won't be it at all, but we have tomatoes, that's for sure. Some of these tomato plants do have this sort of rust on it. This is, I can't think of the name of it right now, but this is very common in this area just due to the real high humidity and a lot of rainfall. There's really not much you can do about it, so we do put a fungicide. I do put a fungicide on these plants, and that's more of a preventative, but you know, the humidity and rain is just really high in this area, so there's not a whole lot more I can do other than that. Probably one of my favorite vegetables is beans, fresh green beans, and we have a Jade variety growing up here, and at the end I have dragon's tongue, and I love both of them. Those are my favorite. I will never not plant Jade beans or dragon tongue. They're both really good. We did have a lot of problems with stuff eating the little seedlings. And if you come down here, you'll see where a lot of them are getting eaten. And some weeds. But you'll see where a lot of them are getting eaten. And I try to do organic gardening as much as possible. A lot of people around here tend to use 7 dust on their plants. I don't like using that. And so I do try to be as natural as possible with my garden. And I figured I'm going to forego the 7 dust and let's just see if I can use organic methods to try and get this past the seedling phase. And honestly, my technique is just keep planting. So as these die off or as these get eaten up, I just keep planting more beans and hoping that I overwhelm whatever's trying to eat my plants. And so far that seems to be working. So in these 2 rows, I have Roma tomatoes, which are all a determinate tomato, which means they only grow to a certain height. But at the very end, I do have indeterminate, and those are German Johnsons. I had to think. I couldn't remember if I got Cherokee Purple or German Johnsons, but I got German Johnsons. I'll take you down there and I'll show you those. So these are my German Johnson plants. I have 4 of them, and I just cleaned them up yesterday, tidied up some of the sucker plants and also some of the lower branches so that they get a little bit more circulation. But these guys are just going to keep growing for me all summer, and they're going to produce a nice slicing tomato. And behind me I have sunflowers. These are mammoth sunflowers that I put in here. They're old seeds that I saved from the last house that we had. If you guys have ever watched any of our old garden videos, you'll see that I had a couple of mammoth sunflowers. I saved those seeds and they are still viable. And so I planted all those along the fence and they're coming up beautifully. So this is my cabbage row with some Swiss chard at the end. And these are my early jerseys and these are my red cabbages. And because I'm trying to do this organically, I am not using any kind of like chemical sprays on these. I am using BT and spinosad to try and keep the caterpillars off. I unfortunately don't have a cloche or row covers to keep the caterpillars off, and so far it's doing pretty well. There is a little bit of indication that something's been eating some of it, but for the most part it's not too bad. There's some little bite marks on this one. This one hardly has any. A couple on the outer leaves. Very, very few. So far this seems to be working pretty well. And then over here are my peppers. Banana peppers all on one side and bell peppers on the other. I think I put a couple chocolate bell peppers in here. Up here I have 4 jalapeno plants. And these are already starting to get some baby peppers on them. All right, and at the very end here is my eggplants. I planted these late, and then after I planted them, we had a frost that came in, a very late frost after our frost date, and these guys just look pretty rough. They are still starting to get some flowers on them. I'm really not too sure if they're gonna make it or not, but if they do, we'll have some ratatouille. This is my herb row, so I have herbs planted in here, just some basil, thyme, oregano, rosemary, a couple beets again that I was testing in here, which only a couple grew. I'll have some beet greens. And then in the next row over here, these are my Brussels sprouts, and again, I've been spraying BT and spinosad on these. There's only a couple bite marks so far. They seem to be doing pretty good. And down here, again, this was another thing that I planted late. This are Clemson spineless okra, and they have been getting demolished by something or another, but so far they're still growing, so there's hope that I might end up with a little bit of okra. And then finally in the last row, I have my collard greens. If any of you guys are southern people love their collard greens. A lot of people don't know how to eat collards. You can take a collard, cut the stem out, and make a collard wrap. Like just instead of using a piece of bread, you can use the collard. Or you can take collards and you can slice them up into like little ribbons and saute them with a little bit of garlic and salt. It tastes delicious. You can put that on top of a piece of toast. Really good. And my kale's still going. And we've been sharing a lot of this with some of the neighbors too. Along the fence, I have some beans growing. These are Kentucky something or another, Kentucky Wonders that I grew. A lot of those got eaten too, but some of them were still growing, and along the back of the fence as well. And then again, I threw some beans on the outside of the fence, and those are coming up. And then I'll take you and show you some of this winter squash I threw out here as well. So these two are the extra winter squash that I had planted. One here and one down there, and they're doing pretty well. And then over here is where I had some watermelon planted, and that got bitten by the frost. There's nothing I could do to save that. I covered it in straw. It just didn't work. And now I just need to take down the fence. So, and plus it just so happens that this is under a tree. It was just an extra spot that I decided to throw some watermelon, and it's just too shady over here. And then you can see some beans and flowers that I planted along the fence. And we have blueberries. And boy, are they good. So that about wraps it up of our Victory Garden June edition. And just for some of you guys that are curious, what is the maintenance for the garden? So far it has been raining every single week. And so I haven't really had to water too often. And I do put a mixture of organic sprays on the garden once a week. Every Thursday is my Thirsty Thursday. I'm going to leave a list of everything that I use on the garden in the description down below if you're curious. And once a week I've been spraying that all along the garden using a sprayer, and that has been keeping my garden looking the way it is. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I am not a green thumb. I do not consider myself a master gardener. I've only been gardening for a couple years, and pretty much everything that I do is trial and error. So if you're looking for advice on how to grow a garden, I would probably look at one of the other channels. But if you're just interested in following along and see how someone who is inexperienced can grow a garden, then keep following us. We'll give you a July update. July is when a lot of the bugs really tend to come out around here. So who knows, maybe this garden will be completely demolished in July and August. So stay tuned and we'll keep you updated. Thanks for watching. These are good.